Hi there, my name is Robert Cairnduff. I'm the Director of Innovation for Global Medical Education here at Elsevier. And I'd like to talk to you today about the evolution of immersive medical education. And can I just say how delighted I was to be asked to speak at the IMU Learning Resource Festival. It's a real honor, and I hope you find this talk interesting and informative. I've been involved in medical or digital medical education for over 25 years now. Back in 1997, I started with an e-learning company that was creating e-learning for drug launches, mainly in the US. It was for training pharmaceutical sales reps about mechanism of action, the disease states that this drug was going to affect, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that we noticed when teaching these pharmaceutical sales reps was that it was the 3D content that was in videos, the 3D anatomical content that really grabbed their attention. It was extremely engaging. And this is important, and this is something that we stuck to and came back to. So let's dial forward a number of years. The CEO of that company was a man called John Moore, who went on to found 3D for Medical. And 3D for Medical was a company that sold images, and it sold it rights managed and stock images based around the 3D anatomical models captured realistically and stylized, and with huge bank of 30, 40,000 images that would sell through Getty, Corbis, and a number of other image sites. And that was very successful. But then came the downturn around 2007, 2008, and it was really 2008 it would hit us. And then John did something very clever. He pivoted towards this new platform that had been created to feed into the iPhone that was had been released a year or two earlier. And that was the App Store. And it was largely misunderstood how this would work. I remember at the time there was no real clear vision of how this App Store would work, certainly not amongst the general public. But John saw it as a perfect platform to be able to create content and sell content, software content that is, globally. So we created a product called the Skeleton System. And this was a reference product for medical students. We had a medically accurate skeleton, so it wasn't a huge leap to create this product. We had to label it, and we had to come up with a way to mimic the 3D environment, because we realized at the time the render engines that were out there could not do justice to the graphics. They would always be a little too boxy and low quality. So we developed something where you had 36 images, one after another, for each rotation. And in that way, we were able to mimic a 3D environment, but using high quality 2D images. This proved to be very successful. And we went on to create a number of different applications, both for medical students and for medical professionals. And then we realized, no, we had to move to the next level. We had to create that real 3D environment. So we had to create our own render engine, which we did. It took us a while, a lot of money, but we did. Because one of the things we could not lose was the quality of the imagery. It had to remain the same. We couldn't take a step backwards where all our competitors were using games engines. We had to stay with the same quality, which we did, and it became very successful. The launch of the iPad was real rocket fuel to what we were doing. The iPhone apps were successful and greatly used as reference tools, but the iPad with its larger screen size was perfect for education. And in fact, and Apple realized this. They also realized we were selling an awful lot of iPads. So luckily, they came involved and they started including us in a lot of their advertising campaigns. Also, we appeared quite a number of times on stage. This particular time here was at the launch of the iPad Pro. We were on stage with Adobe Photoshop, and they showed their product, and then we showed ours, and how it would work on the iPad Pro, and how the extra processing power could create this wonderful product that is so useful for medical students and medical professionals. And that's a real boost to have that shown to 40 million people around the world. It really, really helped. So back now to why this what I would like to call an extra reality, that is the 3D product on a 2D screen. Now, I understand most of you will say, no, that's not extra reality, but I think it's at least the godfather of extra reality, because you're putting something on a 2D screen that you can immerse yourself in. You can go around, you can look at it from any point you like. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second, but here's the need for it. So in the past, if you're looking for as a medical student, you're learning anatomy, you're learning about, let's say, in this particular moment, the levator scapulae muscle. You see it on the left here in a 2D image, netter image, and you can see where it passes. It's in the neck, it goes underneath certain muscles, beside certain muscles. Okay, I can see that. I have to go somewhere else to find out where its origin and insertion points were. And I'd have to use, for example, either if I want to contextualize it against other muscles, I would have to use anatomical slices or MRI scans, like the one on the right here, to understand a list of those going up and down the neck to understand how it reacts or how it sits in relation to other muscles along the neck. Now, of course, you would have cadaveric dissections to do the same thing, but you have very limited time with the cadaver. And even then, you can't pull it apart. It is either pre-dissected or you're dissecting to a particular aim. You can't just choose to check out a particular muscle yourself. So while it was a resource, it wasn't a great resource for what you needed on a regular basis. Then along came our product. Now let's choose the same muscle. So we go in, we choose either by the search tool or directly on the muscle, on the model, the levator scapulae muscle. We can isolate it. So you'd see exactly where it sits, its insertion points and origin point. And you can then see what it's like in the actual articulation itself, the movement. And you can fade down the muscle to see exactly how it helps in that particular movement. You can then go to why that movement happened, the innervation. You can see the path of the nerves that go from the spinal column down to that particular muscle. And you can do the same with the blood supply. If we go up now, we can choose the arteries, and you can see exactly which artery, where it comes from, and how it supplies that muscle. And of course, the beating heart for extra engagement value. So as you can see, this is a whole different way of understanding anatomy and being able to directly go to the pieces of knowledge you want to understand in that 3D model. And that was revolutionary. Now, it was revolutionary for students because in our B2C market, we had no problems. Students understood the value immediately. They understood the increase in cognition rates, the increase in retention rates, because they saw it firsthand and they passed it on by word of mouth. Institutions were a little slower. We needed a bit more validation. And these are some of the very early studies that helped with that, either by calling out one of our products in particular or the value of 3D in general. Then along came AR. So what was next? The beginnings of the extra realities. And the first that came along was AR, augmented reality. And that appeared in a lot of the devices that our platform was on, the iPhone, the iPad, and eventually on some of the Android products. As soon as it became available, we included it. Now, does it have any real pedagogical value? No, I don't think so. But does it have engagement value? Absolutely. For example, sales reps would often use AR in engaging whoever they were talking to. Anytime I was asked, I'll just play this movie here. Anytime I was asked what I did for a living, I'd always pull out my iPhone and go to the heart beating, and I'd put it in the middle of in an AR mode in the middle of the dining table, so people would look around it or explode it out. So you saw the beating parts in unison. That was always the wow factor. And it was extremely engaging, but that's the point. how do we go from that wow factor to the next stage? And that's the real challenge for all of XR, to move beyond that wow factor. That being said, we are seeing some useful and interesting use cases emerging for both MR and VR, the next things, mixed reality and virtual reality. Let's take a quick look at a product. This is a product we created in conjunction with Pearson and Microsoft. As you can see, it uses the same anatomical models as our main platform, while I'm offering that immersive experience. Now, the pandemic escalated demand for all remote learning, and we began to be presented with interesting use cases that greatly enhanced distance learning. Experiments were being conducted with Holohuman as part of a number of different remote learning solutions, from surgical training to clinical rounds. However, one of the most exciting use cases for all XR in medical training, I think, is its ability to create the closest thing to clinical practice there is. Wearing a headset and being immersed, albeit in a virtual situation, still brings with it a sense of jeopardy, the quickening of the heart rate, the sense of controlled panic that is hard to mimic outside of virtual reality. On our nursing education side of Elsevier, we are developing some VR capabilities, as you'll see here. This is a VR product, and it's what we're calling the Virtual Reality Simulation Learning System. And this product has a large number of scenarios that can be played out within a virtual environment, whilst you're monitored and controlled by a facilitator. And this is where I see some of the most exciting use cases for all VR or all XR in medical training. That ability to create the closest thing to clinical practice there is, wearing a headset and being immersed in a virtual situation really helps in bridging that gap between education and clinical practice. So XR is finding some real use cases, which is great, and this bodes well for being taken seriously, not just as a PR exercise by deans. There are a number of catalysts that are driving XR adoption, and these have really been highlighted as a result of COVID. For example, remote learning is now part of many institutions' blended solution to medical learning, and especially in some of the Nordic countries, it is being used more and more as part of a blended solution. The second is the scalability that extra realities allow you. It came out because of COVID. You were only allowed a certain number of people in a room at the same time. The rest had to be on extra realities looking in, whether it's virtual reality or mixed reality. But at that same time, you can have any number of people watching in. There was no limit to the amount of people that you could have attending remotely. And the third, of course, is the effect of Moore's law on any software or hardware for that matter. And with devices becoming cheaper and more powerful, the educational value increases. And that was one of the key barriers to adoption. It goes back to when we had launched our complete anatomy platform. We had no problem with students, as I said before, but we did have a problem with institutions. And one of those problems was, how can we introduce a software that has limited access? In other words, not everyone in the classroom has a smart device, be it a smartphone or later a tablet, iPad, whatever, to be able to view the digital product. Therefore, it's unfair if we introduce it. Or we have to pay for those devices to go into those schools, be it the university does or the supplier does. However, these things change very quickly. I imagine only one generation of devices will be bought. And by the time it comes to the next generation, 99% of the students will have some form of XR product that they use on a regular basis. It's the same thing has happened with iPads, etc. And the same thing will most likely happen with XR realities. It's moving fast. It's moving very fast. every new technology moves that a little bit faster than the one before. And so we will see these devices becoming more and more prolific. However, as it matures, we're going to have to continue to find more and more exciting use cases until we come upon that killer use case for XR. It's out there and it'll happen. We just don't know exactly what it is yet. I think it's the immersion and the jeopardy factor, but that might not be it. It might be something else. We're just going to have to wait and see. So thank you very much, and I hope this has been somewhat informative. And thank you. Goodbye.